Hey class, welcome to week 3. I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and highlight some key points from your chapters this week. You'll be reading 4 chapters, but I'm going to focus on 2 of them, which are groups and teams. We'll talk about leadership as well a little bit this week through your reading and then also into next week. So let's get started on just some key highlights that I want to bring to your attention. So we're talking about groups a lot this week. We've started talking about it in the discussions as well. And groups are really 2 or more individuals. There can be an informal group in the workplace. There can also be a formal group in the workplace. A formal work group has a designated assignment or task that's something that they are going to complete. An informal group has really come together out of a social need instead of an assigned need, if you will. So that might be somebody that you meet regularly as part of your department, maybe have lunch with them, or you guys meet over a coffee break. Whatever it may be, just be aware that groups, 2 or more individuals, there can be a formal group and there can be an informal group. Moving on, I want you to be aware of the 5 stages of groups and as they form. So groups essentially are going to develop in the first stage, which is called the forming stage. Then you're going into the second stage, which is storming. And that's where you might have some conflict within groups. Everybody's trying to figure out their status, their position, their role, what they're doing. So that's the second stage. The third stage is norming. Norming is essentially when relationships and cohesiveness starts to take place. There's a clear understanding of what's going on, who's doing what. And then finally, you get to the fourth stage, which is where the work happens. That's called performing. Everyone has reached their performance level and you're doing your tasks. When you've completed your tasks, you go to the fifth stage, which is considered adjourning. And adjourning can be permanent or it can be simply for the task at hand. So again, those are the 5 stages model of groups. Group decision making. So when you form groups, you generally form them because there's time. You can get more complete information within a group because various sources are sharing their information and you're having a discussion about it. It does take time, as I mentioned. And then also another downside of groups is that the individual responsibility of the individual member is diminished because as a group, you're reporting as a whole, everyone's involved. So if you've ever been involved in a group project in work or in your coursework, you may have seen this happen. In any case, just be aware of this. Group decision making, number 1, does get you more information. Number 2, there are downsides to it because it does take time and resources. And groupthink is another term that's mentioned in your book. This is generally when the consensus of the group overrides other alternate options that the group has maybe come forth with. So maybe the voice of somebody wasn't heard, or because you've arrived at a decision that ends up being your final decision, and you maybe don't explore alternate options. That's groupthink, essentially. Let's move on and talk about teams a little bit more. So teams and organizations. Teams have become more and more popular in organizations to solve problems. They are adept, they're flexible, and they're a great way for companies today to find solutions. Teams can also increase motivation because you're working with other people, you are sharing ideas, maybe facing the challenge together. So these are all positives of why companies today form teams. Groups versus teams. Let's delve a little bit further. In your book on page 275, Exhibit 10-1 shows you some great, it's a great opportunity for you just to take a look and understand more of those differences. Groups interact to share information and make decisions, whereas teams are actually groups whose individual efforts end up in a greater performance. There are 5 types of teams. You can have a problem-solving team, You can have a self-managed team. You can have a cross-functional team. You can have a virtual team, and then you can have a multi-team system in place. So today, more and more companies are using virtual. Again, we're more connected than ever. With the pandemic as well, there's more of a need for virtual teams. This is an organization challenge potentially to have the right software in place to make sure that the employees have the information that they need, the access that they need to be able to connect and work together remotely. Motivating your staff remotely also can be a challenge because you're not seeing them face to face, and you're going to have to use different tactics to essentially help keep them motivated. So those are the 5 types of teams. How do you create a team player? You'll hear that word used a lot. So there's an effectiveness model that you can also take a look at on page 280 of how to create a team. There's some key points that include context, composition, and process. So the different variables can all help you determine how you create a team player, how you maybe hire a team player, how you look for that person, how you cultivate that in your organization and in the individual themselves. So you can select them, you can reward them, and you can train them. These are all conscious efforts that organizations can put in place culturally through their systems, through their processes, and just help create a more nimble, flexible culture and collaborative culture, if you will. Now, all that being said, one final thought. Teams and groups aren't always the answer. There may be a time when your company does need to go with the individual or the department rather than creating a virtual team or a collaborative team. Thanks, class, for listening. This week you have your assignment, your discussion, and your quiz. Let me know if you have any questions about anything so far. Thanks, everybody, for participating. Take care.